Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you for the organizer and the dedication. And thank you for coming today. My name is Margherita Brusa. I am originally Italian and Spanish. I've been working in different countries in Italy, in Spain, in the United States, and nowadays in Israel. But I might have a background that is a little different from yours. I study philosophy and pedagogy, especially children development for the perspective of psychology and morality. And I developed my career as a bioethicist, working side to side with doctors and especially with pediatricians. So my perspective might be a little different from many lecture, but I hope I can provide you from with a perspective that is a little different and hopefully enrich the debate. My lecture is about informed consent to adolescent vaccination. And the question is, do we need it? This boy is Nicolas Montero. He's 16 years old. He lives in the United States. And during the time of the COVID, he wanted very much to receive vaccination. When the vaccination was finally available, he asked the parents to give him permission, and they refused it. They had no intention whatsoever to let him receive the vaccination. They were very convinced anti-vax. Of course, they did not get them themselves, but there was no argument and no possibility of dialogue and of letting their own child to receive it. Nicholas didn't know exactly what to do. He, as I said, 16 years old. He was studying in high school. He was a very good student. He was working on the weekend. And he was quite independent and trying to find out a solution until he discovered that in Philadelphia, children aged 11 and older had the possibility to receive the vaccine without the permission of the parents. So what he did was to go to Philadelphia twice without the parents knowing it and receive the vaccine. Now, these kind of stories were not only in the United States. In Italy, for example, there were several cases of adolescents that wanted to receive the vaccine, and either one or both parents were against it. They went to court, and the cases that reached court and the process always ended with the permission to the adolescent to receive the vaccine. So I wonder why parental consent was needed in the first place. So in order to understand this, we have to take a few steps back and see what are the elements of informed consent that are key to our discussion. We are all familiar with the concept of consent. Consent is a prerequisite for any action in the medical area. If we want to take care of a patient, the patient needs to consent. We cannot touch a person without his or her consent. And this is not only about politeness, this is about respect of the other person and his right or her right to his own body. It's what it's called bodily integrity. So there is no care without consent. And As we say, consent is key to every personal intervention in healthcare. Now, what does it mean, personal? Personal has at least two meanings. One is individual. It is done to a person. And the other is specific. It is done to this person and not to the other person. I wish we keep this distinction in mind because it's key to our discussion later on. Consent can be explicit or implicit, can be oral or written. In some cases, we have consent that is presumed consent, we said, when, for example, in case of emergency, there is no care without consent. Now, individual informed consent is necessary because every person has to take decisions about the risk involved in care. I decide whether it's worth for me taking certain risks, and I decide whether to go for it and to enter into what is a clinical relationship or not. Now, the risk-benefit balance is always individual. And this valuation cannot be done for another person. Now, evidently, higher are the stakes. Higher is the formal structure of the informed consent. When we have significant risk-benefit evaluation, we need a formal informed consent. That's evident to all of us. There are practices like giving antibiotics. The consent to give antibiotics and to take antibiotics is not the same kind of consent that there could be for surgery, for example. So this structure of formal informed consent comes from what is the tradition of business contract. Both in business contract and in informed consent, we need a signature. We need to sign. We need to be aware of what is the situation, to be informed, and to decide that it's important enough to sign. And we know that I think I went back. Yes. Minors cannot sign consent. Now, in the legal tradition of the West, we have contracts in which both parties in the contract are related to one to another on a specific object. Let's think, for example, about selling and buying an apartment. Both parties know what are the risk and the benefit, know the details about the transaction. The transactions imply transactions of money, certain kind of risk. The one that decides to buy the apartment has to evaluate if it's good for him overall or for her, and therefore signs the contract. In the past, somebody that felt sick would go and search for a doctor, would call a doctor. Doctor would come and visit the patient. He had to pay for the visit and has to decide whether the service that the doctor provide and the treatment that the doctor offer were good for him and therefore sign. Now, in common between business contract and formal informed consent are these three key elements. The person who signs the contract must do it freely, without any coercion, voluntarily. He wants to sign, and these two characteristics must be authentic only after full, significant information has been provided, and the parties, especially the person sign, agrees and understand what it is about. But minors cannot sign contracts. Minor cannot enter into this kind of business. Parents do it for them. How do they do it for them? They do it in their place, and they do it for their own good, for the good of the child. These are the two conditions for which parents or guardian can sign an informed consent for their minor children. How do they do it? In medicine, they do within what is called pediatric triangle. The pediatric relationship is a little more complex than, let's say, normal doctor-patient relationship, because there are at least 3 actors that are involved. We have the child or the patient. We have at least one parent or one guardian, more often 2, more often still a whole family behind. And we have a pediatrician and the whole healthcare professionals that work in the care of the patients. Ideally, when there is an healthcare need and there is a treatment to be offered, the ideal situation is that the 3 parties agree and it's possible to carry on with the care of the patient. Sometimes this doesn't happen. There might be conflicts between the pediatrician and the healthcare professionals and the parents. Some other times there are conflicts among the parents that are difficult to resolve. And sometimes when a child is not a baby and it's not a small child anymore, but start to be an adolescent and having an opinion about its own health, then the conflict becomes even more difficult to resolve. Not only this is the situation, we have to consider that this triangle to agree about something is still not enough, because the pediatric triangle develops within the healthcare system, specific circumstances. And these circumstances are not exactly the same everywhere, about circumstances, about places, and about legislation. Now, when we talk about adolescent, we have to think that the more the child grows, the more the child has the right to participate in the care of his own health. To explain a young child what you are going to do, to explain that you are going to touch him, to explain that you are going to put something on his arm, or that you are going to take blood from him, it's fine. But again, it's not only about politeness, it's not only about to recruit his or her collaboration, which is very important. It's not only about not to frighten the child, but it also is about progressively including an active participation of a child and of adolescents that has the ability, progressive ability to understand what's going on and to have an opinion about his own care and about his own health. This is why in the last 10, even 15 years, there is a progressive understanding that it's impossible to take care of mature adolescents without their not only collaboration, but active agreement and consent to take care of them. Not only this is so clear about consenting to treatment, this is even more evident when an adolescent doesn't want a certain kind of treatment. Of course, it depends on the specific disease we are talking about. But just think about vaccination. Who is going to run after a 16-year-old boy that doesn't want to get vaccinated, even if parents and pediatrician or healthcare professional and the states wish very much so? This is why more and more we talk about adolescent self-consent in healthcare. There is a full recognition that adolescents can self-consent, at least in certain circumstances. And the criteria used about deciding when adolescents can fully self-consent independently from the parents are divided in a few categories. The first one is about their status, and the second one is about their service, the service that they seek, what we offer as a healthcare practitioner. Now, about the status, adolescents are divided in two main groups, what they are called emancipated minors and those that are called mature minors. About emancipated minors, we have a few criteria. Those, for example, that already are living outside the home of the parents, those that are economically independent, those that are already married, or those that are already parents themselves. So we might have the case of an adolescent mother, 15 years old, girl that has a baby. In this case, she can consent not only for herself, but also for her baby. And we have the mature minor. The doctrine of the mature minor says that there are minors that are mature enough to understand their situation of health, to comprehend what the treatment offer is about, and to be able to ponder and to evaluate what are the short and the long-term consequences of the decision. So emancipated minor and mature minor are the status. But about the service, we have what we offer as healthcare. So we, for example, they give adolescent self-consent to sexually transmitted disease or those that have addiction. Now, let's take a look, for example, at this graphic. We see here that about the health services, we have different kind of services that are where is permitted self-consent. We see sexually transmitted diseases, substance abuse, prenatal care, contraceptive, sexual assault evaluation, HIV, mental health care, and then immunization and dental care. What is important here is to understand something, that we might wonder about the maturity of a minor that comes to us with sexually transmitted disease or with substance abuse. But there is a full agreement of the fact that it's better to offer them the service they request without the presence of the parents, because this is good for themselves and for public health. So there is an agreement that is better for everybody to offer this service. But immunization and dental care are something special. And we focus now on immunization. Here, this graphic shows you when adolescents can give their consent to immunization. These are from the United States. And the states that you see here, the different number of states, are those that do have some kind of legislation or policy on immunization. Many do not have. What do we see here? This is very interesting. There is a whole combination of the criteria we just spoke about quite creatively mixed. So the first, for example, is all immunization except COVID. The second doesn't want to cite COVID. They say only emergency, except emergency use authorization. Others go only for specific immunization. The most creative do combination, for example, of age and certain kind of diseases. And you see here those 12, 14, 15, 16. Some do not use the emancipated clause, but they talk about marriage or parents and add in high school graduate. Other, when the parents cannot be contacted, that's it, we do without them. And others are more strict and decide only if court order. So you see how this is still confusing what is the lack of harmonization about this. So on the one hand, there is recognition of the need of give self-consent to adolescents, and on the other, we still don't know exactly what to do. And why is that? Because vaccination is a very special case, and it's a very hot subject. This, what I show you here, is a picture from the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, when the debate and the anti-vax were very, very strong. And what do we see here? We see a police, an English policeman that holds the Vaccination Act that was to force everybody to vaccine the children. We see a woman that holds the baby and the man that holds the woman's hand as a way to force her to do the vaccination. And we see death coming to the baby. We should remember that at the time, first of all, we are talking about administering vaccination to baby. Parental involvement was absolutely necessary. There was no vaccination of adolescents at the time. And parents, often the mother, had to bring the baby. And second, they had to accept the risk. And there was risk. All children would get somehow affected by the vaccination and develop mild disease. And 1 to 2% would die from complication of vaccination. But today we are in a considerably different situation. Vaccines are extremely safe. There is no need for parents to bring the adolescents, and there is no need for anybody to consent for risk. And in this context, adolescent self-consent is extremely important for many other factors. First of all, is to respect the integrity of their body, the right to health. Second, to give them a way to exercise the autonomy that they are developed as adolescents and to exercise their own judgment and maturity. So adolescent myself consent to vaccination because there is no need for a clinical contract of informed consent. And here I use specifically the adjective clinical. We spoke about the formal informed consent, the one that you have to sign. But here I wish to take your attention to two main paradigms we have of healthcare. On the one, we have clinical care, and on the other, we have public health. So in a doctor-patient relationship, a person feels sick, go to the doctor, seeks help, and the doctor try to explain the situation, try to find out what the person has through certain tests and exam, and go into a relationship by which the person that comes is my patient, and there is a process of care in which there is consent. There might be even formal informed consent if the things is very important. But when we talk about public health, the paradigm of health is a little different. First of all, is the public health that approaches the population, approaches a group of people, not an individual. And the public health solicit participation. They invite to participate. The benefit and risk is not anymore something that should be evaluated in the very specific situation. It's the same for all. The person has to decide whether he wants to participate or not. But even if he does participate, doesn't become for that reason a patient. There is no need of formal informed consent, but there is need of participation, of what it is called voluntary participation. You want to go and to take vaccine. So we say that vaccination has negligible risk. And here comes back again in the second point, the differentiation we had at the beginning between individual and specific. Of course, vaccination is done on the specific person. For this reason, is individual, but is not different from this and that person that come from the vaccine, is non-specific. All those that are part of the population are welcome to come for the vaccine. Of course, and I wish to take your attention at the end, special cases should be evaluated within the doctor-patient relationship, and there should be counseling. If we have an adolescent that is immunodepressed, is not the same as the rest of the population. Of course, there are specific cases. Those specific cases enter into the clinical relationship, but for the rest, vaccination brings significant benefit to the individual that voluntarily participate, to the population. And the participation is in itself expression of consent. That's why also vaccination cannot be given without consent. But the consent is the voluntary participation of the person, in this case of the adolescent. What is the best form for vaccination? Most probably opting out. Why? Because opting in opting in schemes, you need somebody to come and you need to enter into this doctor-patient relationship, an explanation at the individual level, and you need to do something active and to sign and to explain. For example, elective surgery is the most extreme, but many others. In opting out scheme, there is an action that is given by default. You come here, I give you the vaccine. Because you come, I give you the vaccine. You know that this is the place where we do vaccination. So it's a default action. And of course, there is no coercion, because if you don't want the vaccine, you simply don't come. Opting out is not only simpler, easier, and straightforward, it also increases recruitment, is more efficient. In other situations of healthcare, when there has been comparison between opting in and opting out schemes, we have realized that opting out are much more efficient. So, in brief, it's valid to presume consent. It's more efficient. It also reduces tensions inside the pediatric triangle. Where is the consent? Have you bring the consent? Did your parent? We forgot. The parents is a company, it's not a company. Are the parents divorced? Are not divorced? Did you sign? There is an infinite list of problems that are created when we are within the opting in parent. Higher rate of uptake, adolescents respects the right to health, there is dissent, as we said already, and is coherent. This is also very important. I don't have the time here to talk about it, but we are talking about adolescents that, as the speaker before said, they have been suffering during the COVID-19, the whole situation. At the psychological level, at the emotional level, they know what it is, a pandemic. They know the value of vaccine, sometimes even more demonstrated, are even more mature than other people. And it's right to give them space to consent on something where they can definitely consent. Now, opting out consent gives a burden to the system, to the public health system and to the clinician. Information is not only a duty, it must be done well. The information is not only targeting the population, it should be targeting society. It's not only about saying what vaccination is about, it's educating on the value of vaccination and to offer vaccination as something that is a social responsibility. Therefore, some take-home message would be that opting out schemes reduce vaccine hesitancy, reduce pressure on healthcare professionals. There is the service and the risk profile. It develops the possibility of independence for adolescents, and they also give the possibility of developing responsible citizenship. This forces us to take responsibility as public health and professional to give proper information, education, and for specific cases, counseling. Thank you very much.
Poštovane kolegice i kolege, moja prezentacija će biti na engleskom s obzirom na naše goste, ali ja ću govoriti na našem dragom hrvatskom jeziku. Kada smo spremali ovaj internacionalni vakcin meeting, onda mi se čini bila je poanta na long life, bila je poanta na cjeloživotnom cijepljenju i na značaju cijepljenja kao preventivne mjere za zdravlje ne samo dječje populacije, nego i za zdravlje, cjeloživotno zdravlje cijele populacije. Pristup je u biti i filozofija cijepljenja je pružiti na pasivni ili na aktivan način zaštitu protiv cijepljenjem preventabilnih bolesti. Tu imamo veliko iskustvo i ono što mogu kazati da je ključna u imunološkom smislu što želimo potaknuti, to je tu memoriju, imunološku jednu memoriju induciranu sa cijepljenjem koja je u biti suština i same prevencije, koja je prevencija od infekcije, koja nam daje mogućnost razvoja specifičnih antitijela na uzročnika protiv kojeg provodimo cijepljenje i koja nam daje, s kojom zapravo želimo postići taj jednu zadovoljavajuću razinu imunološke memorije koja će nam biti protektivna, koja ima protektivnu ulogu kratkotrajno i dugotrajno u smislu prevencije bolesti i poticanja znači i imuniteta na celularnoj razini. Prema tome, specifični imunološki odgovor organizma na cijepljenje je ono što želimo postići. Naravno da sada u tom kontekstu kad idemo razmišljati, onda i razvoj cjepiva je se mijenjao u tom segmentu. S jedne strane u početku je to bilo iskustveno, zatim ali smo sa razvojem znanosti i sa translacijskom medicinom, pogotovo u ovom segmentu, pokušali to involvirati što bliže prema praksi. Prema tome u suvremenom svijetu koristeći razne takozvane omik tehnologije nastojimo se približiti specifičnom imunološkom odgovoru onakvom kakav pojedinac u određenoj populaciji u kontekstu epidemioloških okolnosti u kojim živi može i treba dobiti, a s druge strane iste te omik tehnologije nastojimo koristiti i u smislu predikcije neželjenih reakcija na cjepivo. Mi smo svjesni naših suvremenih izazova u pogledu vakcinologije. S jedne strane, apsolutno živimo globalizaciju i postoji u toj transportnoj povezanosti postoji velika šansa i velika mogućnost reuvoza divljih sojeva u područja, znači iz endemskih područja u širom svijeta, što nam je i COVID pokazao brzinom kojom se proširio globalno. Isto tako imamo nove bolesti koje zarazne bolesti koje su nam pred vratima i kojih svaki dan sve postajemo sve svjesniji. Prema tome jedna i ova filozofija cjeloživotnog znači cijepljenje za sve dobne skupine, odnosno cijepljenje u odrasloj dobi i ne samo u onoj dobi poviše 65. Međutim, svi ti naši napori trebaju biti usmjereni na evidence-based znanja, znači na i pravilne, odnosno optimalne izvore informacija koje su pogotovo u ovom segmentu preventivnog aspekta izuzetno značajni. Posebnu pozornost zahtijevaju takozvane izolirane populacije koje žive jednu svoju kulturu življenja, ortodoksne religijske zajednice koje imaju poseban odnos prema općenito prema medicini, a pogotovo prema ovom aspektu, a novi pogledi su fokusirani i pokušavaju se, znači ono što je novo u ovom segmentu, to je imunizacijom ići prema prevenciji malignih bolesti i još nešto što je izuzetno bitno i klinički i javno zdravstveno, to je povezati porast antimikrobne rezistencije u kontekstu cijepljenjem redukcije antimikrobne rezistencije na lokalnoj, nacionalnoj i globalnoj razini, uzimajući u obzir koliko štete direktne i indirektne proizlazi iz porasta antimikrobne rezistencije. Benefiti cijepljenja su vrlo poznati, znači počev od razvoja znači specifične imunosti, smanjenja komplikacija bolesti protiv koje se cijepljenje provodi i ono o čemu se posebno tijekom COVID pandemije govorilo, to je taj znači imunitet krda, znači zaštititi one populacije vulnerabilne koje zbog svoje osnovne bolesti nisu mogle biti direktno involvirane u sam proces cijepljenja. Naravno, kad idete pogledati dalje, ono što je posebno što je nama cilj je zapravo od jučer do danas i cjeloživotni što nam je cilj, to je razviti sigurna cjepiva koja su u početku je to bilo postavljeno od Luisa Pastera, nije se dugo u toj paradigmi ništa promijenilo. Znači imali smo i filozofija, ideja Pastera je bila izolirati, inaktivirati i injektirati potom znači. Onda se to kasnije, što je to donijelo? To nam je donijelo, to znamo, donijelo nam je eradikaciju. Naravno da smo malo frustrirani, mislili smo da ćemo se riješiti polija prije, razumijete, i opet nam je tu malo ti milenijski ciljevi nismo uspjeli ostvariti onako kako se to globalno postavilo od strane Svjetske zdravstvene zaštite, smanjenja redukcija morbiditeta i znači eliminacija nekih bolesti. Također nismo bili dovoljno uspješni zahvaljujući, odnosno ja ne bih rekla zahvaljujući, nego zbog utjecaja antivaksera koji su tu metodu koja je iako dokazano učinkovita doveli u pitanje na jedan vrlo paradoksalan način, tako da zapravo mi zadnjih godina umjesto da smo eliminirali morbile, da smo eliminirali difteriju, mi sad ponovo pričamo pokušavamo doseći one propisane cijepne obuhvate, ali to je znači taj način i promišljanje načina intervencije na koji način možemo potaknuti dostizanje potrebnih, ono što znanost zna, cijepnih obuhvata za pojedine bolesti. To je ono što nam je realitet danas. Naravno, kad govorimo o paradigmama cijepljenja, imamo tri razine paradigme, znači prvo je ono što smo živjeli i to je kraj 20. stoljeća, to je empirijsko cijepljenje koje se provodilo gdje smo imali te javnozdravstvene kampanje koje su bile usmjerene na dostizanje visokih cijepnih obuhvata. I ja moram priznati da kao mladi specijalist kad sam sudjelovala na nekim sličnim ovakvim skupovima, kad su profesori govorili, oni su tako bili, njihovi su slajdovi bili gotovo jednolični. 99% morbila, 90% pertusisa, 98%, znači kad su davali godišnja epidemiološka izvješća. Tako je bilo ja mislim da je tada bilo takvo vrijeme i gdje gdje se manje propitivalo, gdje ova digitalizacija u kojoj mi živimo i ta jedan digitalizacija nam je donijela nešto drugo, donijela nam je transparentnost s jedne strane, što je jako dobro, ali nam je donijela i izvore informacija i informiranja koje se često interpretiraju kako kome, ne baš na kritičan način, što je rezultiralo tim frustrirajućim smanjenjem cjepnih obuhvata. Zatim je bila ta paradigma, znači izolirati, inaktivirati, injektirati, i ova treće doba koje mi sada pokušavamo živjeti, po koje sada mi pokušavamo uhvatiti, a to je jedan sistematičan pristup u kojem smo usmjereni prema individualnoj prilagodbi cijepljenja sukladno potrebama pojedinca. Znači, prije je bila ideja sva cjepiva u istoj dozi za svu populaciju. Sada, pokušavajući i polazeći od personalizirane medicine, idemo cijepiti prema onome sa cjepivom koje je potrebno odgovarajućem čovjeku sukladno njegovoj, kao pedijatar kažem, razvojnoj dobi, odnosno životnoj dobi, epidemiološkim okolnostima u kojim živi i naravno uzimajući širi kontekst u kontekst razmišljanja. Prema tome, primjenom novih tehnologija razvija se, znači, s jedne strane idemo na maksimalnu zaštitu pojedinca, a s druge strane idemo pokušati napraviti predikciju neželjenih reakcija na cjepiva kojima moramo biti svjesni. I kao odgovorni ljudi mi ne možemo govoriti da nemamo problem, da nemamo neželjene reakcije. Imamo ih, ali idemo ih pokušati sa tim personaliziranim pristupom, koristeći suvremena znanja iz imunologije, pokušajući ih na taj način pravodobno predvidjeti da bismo ih uopće mogli izbjeći. Sigurno da tu ulazi u obzir niz genetskih potencijala s jedne strane, s druge strane imamo te negenetičke regulacije iz okoliša u kojem živimo i gdje i sve to trebamo uzeti zajedno u obzir. To je u biti genomika, to je taj suvremeni pristup gdje pokušavamo, to je u biti pojednostavljeno rečeno, gdje pokušavamo tu zajedničko djelovanje nasljeđa i okoline u kojem živimo primijeniti i na ovo područje. Znači, pokušavam razumjeti što treba od djeteta u dječjoj dobi, što treba trudnica, što trebaju odrasle osobe, što treba treća generacija, na koji način treba zaštititi, na koji način treba zaštititi pretile osobe. To se također iskustvo pokazalo sada tijekom COVID-a, da oni imaju povećane rizike i da imaju osobito teške oblike bolesti, i to su izazovi personaliziranog pristupa cijepljenju. Naravno, trebamo imati na umu da s jedne strane smo usmjereni i mi, a pogotovo roditelji, odnosno ljudi koji se cijepe, s jedne strane na sadržaj cjepiva, s druge strane na mogućnosti njihovog djelovanja i na načine pojedine aplikacije, pri čemu često imamo različit pristup mi kao profesionalci u odnosu na onoga koga cijepimo i prema kome smo usmjereni. Naravno da želimo boosterirati imunološki odgovor i iskoristiti prirodne potencijale i mogućnosti koje ima. Kažem, suština je u biti dugoročna memorija. Ovo je jedan kratki algoritam pristupa prema prepoznavanju takozvanih neoantigena u području iz pojedinih tumorskih tkiva, koje se onda izoliraju i na koje se onda složenim mehanizmom nastoji producirati upravo takvo cjepivo koje bi trebalo utjecati i na preventivni pristup liječenju malignih bolesti, što je apsolutno nešto što se nadam da će naše mlade generacije na nekim idućim skupovima to lijepo moći i prikazati i to je put u kojem se ovaj segment razvija. Naravno, još jednom trebam istaknuti koliko je cijepljenje kompleksna intervencija, koliko svaki put ispočetka moramo uzeti u obzir prenatalne, neonatalne, postnatalne epidemiološke okolnosti, osobitosti rasta i razvoja i mi u biti kao pedijatri imamo ključno pitanje ne da li, nego kad. Kad u kontekstu akutnih stanja, kad u kontekstu kroničnih stanja i kad u kontekstu one osobnosti koju to dijete ima, bilo da se radi o prematuritetu ili nekom specifičnom, znači kroničnoj bolesti koja zahtijeva specifične načine liječenja osnovne bolesti, gdje sa cijepljenjem, znači želimo biti suportivni u tom kontekstu i ono što ja na ovakvim predavanjima želim reći, ne možemo imati transplantiranog bolesnika kojeg znamo da ćemo imati, kojeg predviđamo da ide u transplantaciju ili u nekakvu složenu kardiokiruršku intervenciju i onda da u toj pripremi takvog složenog pacijenta zaboravimo da nismo u onom momentu dok nismo išli prema imunosupresiji, tad treba djelovati. I to je razlog zašto o tome treba razmišljati, zašto o ovome trebaju promišljati, zašto cijepljenje nije problem samo pedijatara primarne zdravstvene zaštite, zašto je cijepljenje doista izazov za sve subspecijalnosti, neovisno onome što im je u fokusu njihovog stručnog i znanstvenog interesa. Prema tome, ono što promičemo to je individualni pristup da bismo mogli riješiti ovaj moderni paradoks smanjenja cjepnih obuhvata unatoč svim poznatim benefitima i u zaključku ono što bi kazala, personalizirano cijepljenje je zapravo se naslanja na koncept personalizirane medicine. Moramo razviti specifične metode odgovora sukladne potrebi pojedinca onako kako treba i pomaknuti paradigmu da ne cijepimo da ne dajemo svima isto cjepivo u istoj dozi na isti način, obrnuto pojedincu dajemo onda kad on treba ono što on treba u dozi u kojoj treba, a naravno naši prijatelji epidemiolozi moraju voditi računa da je populacija, znači mi smo kao kliničari usmjereni na pojedinca, naši kolege epidemiolozi sve to trebaju staviti u jedan epidemiološki kontekst zaštite cjelokupne populacije. Hvala vam lijepa.